Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Kansas City-based jazz saxophonist and educator Matt Otto on the 2024 CD, The Landscape Listens. It was recorded in Portugal, and this new album features Matt on tenor saxophone alongside Xose ZOH SAY Miguélez on tenor as well, and A Bay Rábade on the piano. It showcases a collaboration between these three renowned musicians, bringing about a musical landscape rich in emotional depth, improvisational dialogue, and sonic beauty. We cover the entirety of this project, what's coming up, and so much more as we get to the end of this 2024. Enjoy this interview.
Well, I love the Landscape Listen, so thank you for taking a minute out. I'm going to profile it this week on the program, so I appreciate you taking a minute out.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it just feels good. There's a level of it that's it's a little bit more. It's low key in a good way, and it just feels meditative. It just has a really solid quality. It sounds like you guys really blended well from the first note, and it just deepened as the album went forward.
Yeah, it was really fun to do that project. It was great to just be there too. Just recording and being in Portugal was an amazing experience for me. So,
speaking of being in Portugal, take me back to how this project began, how this relationship with these musicians began, and how this vision of the sound and sonic quality came to reality.
So, Xose Miguélez is one of my oldest students. I taught him over Zoom and Skype for years, and then about, I don't know, maybe 6 or so years ago, he flew out to Kansas City, and I helped produce his first album, which used local musicians, all of which you know, Ben Leifer, Kazilla Moot. Maybe you don't know the guitar player Storm Nilsson. He's from the West Coast, from San Francisco. Or actually Carmel. But the rest of the band was from here. And that was maybe 6 or 8 years ago. I can't remember exactly. But he became professional, after studying with me for a long time. And we became really good friends just through, lessons and spending so much time over basically the internet. So the first time I met him in person was when he came to Kansas City. And then since then, he's just been playing professionally in Spain. He also teaches bagpipes. He's an excellent bagpipe player and teaches bagpipes at the university there outside Galicia in Spain. And anyway, I told him I was coming to Spain with the Kansas, University Big Band for a tour that Dan organized. And so he said, well, let's try to do an album while you're here. If you can stay after the tour, stay in Spain for a while. So I stayed for about a week after the tour in Galicia, and we rehearsed, played some gigs, and then did that album in Portugal. We drove up there. And so the A Bay Rábade, the piano player, was a friend of Xose's who he's worked with. And so that was the first time I had met him, was the day we started rehearsing. And we all put in 2 songs each for the recording, rehearsed it for a few days, then did a gig in Portugal, and then the next day went in the studio all day and recorded the material. So that's kind of how it happened in a nutshell.
So what is it like in this town in Portugal? What's the vibe like there?
Well, it's very old. Things there are so much older than here. The buildings are ancient and the architecture is amazing. It literally looks like you're in a medieval, one block will look like a medieval set from a movie. And then the next one will have modern glass buildings with mirrors. This like really wild architecture. The studio was beautiful, and it was, they have a huge arts community there, and it's subsidized by the state. So the studio we played at is actually subsidized by the state, so the rates are very affordable, basically to help encourage people to record and make music. And it was a beautiful studio that was basically used mostly to rehearse local big bands and other ensembles, non-jazz ensembles. So it was really fun to get to record there as well.
Yeah, I remember the first time I ever went to Europe, more specifically Italy, and I just could not believe how young America is. When you walk through those kind of, you know what I'm saying? It's like you realize all of the talk of America being the new kid on the block, it's just compounded when you go to a place like Portugal or Italy, Spain, something like that, and you just see the antiquity of these buildings that have literally been around for thousands of years.
Yeah, they've basically been around before, the colonization of the Americas. So it's pretty amazing, like you said. Yeah, really cool.
So the one thing I'm curious as a musician and a creative, when you go to an area that's new like this, that's outside of the scope of the States, and you're just in a different frame of mind, how much of that vibe of where you're at seeps into your bones and influences the sound, the sonic quality of this album?
Well, I would say you're definitely humility comes to mind. Working with Ave, who's a very accomplished piano player and composer, just trying to listen really carefully to him and absorb as much of his influence in the moment that I could, just by respecting him and listening to how he played. Amazing time. He really had some of the best sense of time. In that, for instance, we did a couple takes of various things, like that Epilogo, which is his tune that is the end of the album, I believe. And the takes we did, when we compared the different takes, the metronome marking was identical to exactly identical. I don't mean like within 2 or 3 clicks. It was exactly identical to where the ending ended at exact same moment. It was the same length. Like, that's how perfect his time was. It was kind of uncanny. And we didn't check it on every tune, but it was the case on that tune, which was, pretty rare, honestly. Mark Ferber has time like that, the drummer I've worked with. It's like pretty much metronomic, in terms of the stability of it, while still feeling, very human and undulating and grooving. So, yeah, he was, I guess just listening to him carefully and trying to really get as much influence from him through listening as I could. I feel like that's all you can really do when you don't have the benefit of having played with someone for 10 or 20 years, You just try to do as best you can, through listening and being empathetic and open-minded and non-judgmental.
When you look back on the scope of your career and all the albums that you made, I'm curious, in the creative process of making something, there's things that you discover about yourself, about your voice, about the way that you approach your instrument, individually and as a collective. What did you learn over the process of this recording? And I guess it's more of a general statement. What do you walk away from each successive release discovering about the way that you approach the bandstand and the way that, your voice has evolved over time?
Let's see. It's a good question. I guess, to be open to collaborating with other people. When Xose suggested this, I wouldn't say hesitant. I was just like not really sure what to expect, but I just said yes to it and assumed that, he's such a great person and such a great musician in terms of his the mental state he's in when he plays. He's just a really good cat, good ears. He listens, tries to interact. He has a lot of really good habits of performance and creating music that are infectious. You know, it's good to play with people like that. They remind you of things that you want to strive for when you play. So I knew it would be a good experience to do something with him. So I just kind of said yes to it, and then just took a back seat and let him kind of organize it with Abe. And I guess just learning to say yes to stuff and going in with an open mind and seeing what happens, you know. And it was fun. It was different than I expected, and it came out nice. And the concert we did the day before was really cool. Just playing for, you know, playing for audiences over there who just like everyone's listening. It was like the place was packed, and when I had my eyes closed, it felt like I was playing to an empty room. It was so quiet. You know, it was amazing.
You know, it's interesting.
You know,
oh yeah,
cool.
No, sorry. No, you're good.
Oh no, you're good.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, I'm done. Yeah.
You know, the one thing that's interesting about the sound on this album is that, you know, people get used to a traditional rhythm section, but to have this configuration of two horns with the piano, I think it just really, it created a different atmosphere for it. Was that something that you were going in being very cognizant of this and kind of, you know, broadening that notion to have a different kind of sound on a jazz record?
Well, certainly Xose was. It was his vision. And, you know, I thought, you know, exactly like what you said. I would have been like, hey, let's get a bass player and a drummer, you know, something I'm more accustomed to and familiar with. And, but as opposed to doing that, I just trusted his instincts. And I would have never put this album together with piano and two saxes. It just seems somewhat crazy, you know, like the instrumentation. But I had done that duo album with Leonard Thompson, which I really loved doing. And it's just piano and sax, so it's really not that different. But I certainly wouldn't have thought of it. So it was his vision, and it just required me to kind of just say yes to it and then try to contribute as best I could.
The one thing about talking about these projects is this came out in October, and by the time it comes out, there's so many miles on the odometer. You're looking in the rearview mirror, and it's just inching away from you. So what are your plans on promoting this, possibly doing live shows, or what's coming up for you as we head to the end of this year and charge into a new one?
Well, I do have another album I'm working on. As far as this trio album, you know, we've had a little bit of, you know, a few people have checked it out, and I've gotten a couple reviews and a little bit more, over there in Spain. But, the thing we were planning to do was maybe do another project at some point in the future. And then possibly at that time set up a few more gigs compared to the first version of it. So we'll see how that unfolds. It may not be next summer, but, you know, maybe every few summers we'll try to do something moving forward. And then this other project it's finished. The recording's finished. I've been mixing it, mostly waiting on the art. A really great artist named Philip Burke is doing the cover for it. And he's super busy, lives up in Chicago. He's constantly getting commissions, really big commissions for stuff. So he's been, you know, working on this cover art for a while, but he has to kind of prioritize some of this other stuff he's doing. So once I get that in my hands, I'll be able to kind of finish up the last round of mixes for this new album and then get it mastered. The new one is local cats, you know, Zach Morrow, Matt Villinger, Peter Schlam. Some of the tracks have Ben Leifer, some have Jeff Harshbarger and John Kazillermoot, Alex Frank on guitar. So that'll be, hopefully I'll get it out before the new year, but with the art, the way it's going, it may take a little longer than that. Not in a huge hurry, but that's my next project.
Speaking of art, I love the cover of this album. It just has that dusk urban landscape vibe with the storefronts.
Yeah.
Who took that? How did that come about?
So that's Xose's wife, Paula, made that cover. She's she makes children's clothing, designs children's clothing, fashion for children, and she's also very good with like graphic art and working with the computer and stuff. So she created the cover art, and she's done some covers for me too for some of my ear training books that I've done with Xose. We've put out a few different ear training books just for, educational resources, and she's did the covers for those as well.
So it would be safe to say, in this post-pandemic world of really benefiting the artist, the best place to pick up a copy to benefit you and the band is to go to Bandcamp, correct?
Yeah, Bandcamp's great. You know how it is. It's like we get a nice, out of $10, I think I get around 6 or more. Pretty good deal for artists compared to streaming or something.
And if anybody out there wants to catch you live, and I must say, and I know I always say this when we talk, one of the most sublime moments I've ever experienced in a live environment was probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer. It was before the pandemic, when you were playing at the Green Lady at the Black Dolphin with Dave Scott. It was amazing. So if anyone wants to keep up with what you're doing live, where do they go?
I usually post listening kind of gigs. I don't usually post like regular gigs, but if I feel like it's something worth listening to, I post it on Facebook. That seems like to be the main way I do it. And then occasionally that gets picked. The information is somehow picked up by the Casey Jazz Calendar if it's local. But if it's in LA or New York, it'll be on Facebook.
Okay, cool. Matt, great to catch up with you. Thank you, sir. Have a great holiday, end of 2024 and 2025. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Portugal, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Matt for his time and always swinging on by Neon Jazz. If you want to hear more Neon Jazz interviews, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.